All right, thank you so much for staying with Daybreak. We're still talking about that conversation on mental health. Retired Major Wairimu Mukuri, a psychologist, is with me. She's been in the trenches before, and she's part of the team that deals men and women in uniform. Honorable Sylvia Kasanga, nominated senator, is also with me, and Ken Munyu, a psychologist, is with me here in studio. Ken, we were talking about the best way of dealing with these issues and what, from your perspective, is the best approach. Yeah, and we seem to have two different categories here. There's the men and women in uniform, and then there's the ordinary civilians like myself.
First, I don't entirely agree with Major. That we can only have military people dealing with military issues. We bring back the conversation, can a Catholic priest give marital counseling? It's just the same example. And the answer is yes. It's not about who they are, it's about what skills they have. So even I am privileged that one time when our forces went into Somalia, before they were repatriated back, I was involved in training the people, the military, who are to come and debrief them. And one of the responses that came from the military is, it is very good that first we can even hear from the civilians on what we need to do. In the curricula of even the military and the police, we need to introduce an aspect of work-life balance. Major has said that generally the uniformed forces spend a lot of their time out there protecting us, the work that we really appreciate, but we also must teach them how to balance between their work and their life. When a policeman goes into the house, they are no longer a police officer. They become a husband in that house and a father. Not a police father, but they are a father, and they need to forget. I like the conversation that was started yesterday, that they shouldn't even carry firearms into their houses because they are not going there to protect their family. They are now going there as a family person. We need to look at a holistic approach of dealing with this issue. First, Trevor, if you have friends and they have not been checking on you, please don't do what they are not doing. Check on your friends. The problem with us right now is that we have closed ourselves up. We have somehow become selfish, and we want to protect our own territory, forgetting that in African context, we are communal people. There is what we call even communal trauma, that an entire community, we are now suffering from communal trauma. That last year during the first wave, we were only hearing of numbers. During now the third wave, the numbers have become people that we know. So we are all processing losses and griefs, and we cannot do this alone. We need to come together and talk. One of the best approaches, and Senator Kasanga talked about it, is when we make it a community approach towards healing. We need to come together and ask ourselves, how can we move together as a community? Individually, you are only going to sulk into depression alone because you are either going to be delusional or paranoid. And the next thing we see, you become schizophrenic, unaokota makaratasi kwa barabara, because you think you can only do it alone. But when you involve others, a shared problem is half solved. Two, and second and the most important, is reach out for help. The moment you realize that things are not okay, you are not easily excited. Yesterday, I had a tough day, so I decided to watch some comic relief in the evening. And the comedian was saying, if I have wasted my 30 minutes making people laugh and you still cannot laugh, your problems are worse than my talent. Because now we have even lost our sense of humor. We generally cannot laugh. We are seeing life as if things have become too tough. I want to tell this to our people. It is never that serious. In as much as things are out of hand, but at least when you go out there and you start solving problems with others, you're going to realize that together we can come together and do things that are better. However, men are doing this, but they are doing it in the wrong way. We are meeting in car parks. You saw a picture trending yesterday that people are even meeting in forests to talk. But besides the talking, they are also bringing alcohol. The first initial thing that they were doing to come together to talk was a good thing. But the moment they introduce intoxicants, then we lose the point, because we are going to start crying now, and we don't know whether we are crying because we are high or we are crying because we need to come together and look at how best can we do this? Even sports, I would urge the government, can we relook at some of these measures that we put into place? Because sports have a way of bringing out the energy, and the energy blocks out. Our churches, I don't know, Trevor, sometimes I feel like the government have the wrong advisors. Because how do you close churches and you open markets? There are people who look to go and get hope just once in a week by going to a church and just praying and just listening to somebody. Can we even bring, and I think you're doing well as a media, where you're bringing people who can instill hope. Can we avoid less of politicians right now and more of helpers? Because media is a tool that can really inform people. Bring more and more informers. Bring more and more motivational speakers. I thank Citizen because sometimes morning when I am not going anywhere and I see those people warming us up and I try a move or two and my daughter is there laughing and saying, Daddy, hawezi, yeah? But it's a way that we are engaging our people. The more we listen to talks that are positive, the more even our mind shifts to positivity. Let's focus on what is positive right now. Less reporting on what is negative. Of course, it's good to raise issues when they occur, but less of them and more on positivity.
Challenge accepted. Kasanga, let me bring you in on this. What was the bill supposed to deal with, especially when it comes to men and women in uniform? Because this is an open debate. Ken doesn't think they should be treated differently. Meja Wairimu thinks they should be because their training is different. What was your bill going to, how was it going to address this challenge?
You know, I want to agree with both of them in a way, because as Kevin is saying, you know, we are all in the same boat when it comes to mental health. But as Meja Mukira says, the men and women in uniform, both in the armed forces as well as our police force, they're exposed. Their daily work is an exposure to constant trauma. In fact, you can say every day they experience trauma when they're dealing with Kenyans on very different levels and issues. Of course, then their lives are a bit different from say, the rest of our citizens. And therefore, probably their care and rehabilitation and approach towards mental wellness must be a little bit more cushioned, maybe than the rest of us. But in the end, like Kevin says, everyone goes home. You're a father, you're a mother, you're a wife, your children are there. If your traumas are not dealt with, they will affect the children, and then you will see that, what they call that vicious cycle, because children now will have the same trauma which they will then take out into the Kenyan citizenry and all. So in fact, I want to say that it was because of the efforts of Meja Mukira that the bill has provisions here for care and rehabilitation of the armed forces. In fact, I'm even looking for the clause itself, so that I can just see what it covers for.
I can let you find it. I can let you find it and bring in Meja Mukuri and just find out from her why her argument is that they should be different. As you look for that clause, Senator, find that clause, then we see what it's about. But Meja Mukuri, you're saying that what is your justification, just so that we understand? Because sometimes, and forgive us, because we may be civilians, we don't understand exactly what goes on in the minds of men and women in uniform.
Okay, no problem, Trevor. I think first and foremost, just to respond to what Ken said, I said that, but the training can happen that can be able to onboard civilians to understand military psychology, right? And that is very critical. But I also just want to make a case for why there should be a very special consideration in the mental and behavioral care management for men and women in uniform. And I'm going to just talk from my own experience, right? And I want to be able to talk about it just how for me it was as a professional, but also a person. One of the things that you need to understand is that there is no rule besides boots on the ground. It doesn't matter, unless you're dead, you are going to fall into line and you're going to be deployed wherever you're going to go. Some of the men, especially that I came across, were not in a position to be able to be responsible for themselves at that particular time. But what happens is that the people who are in command do not also have the skills and technique to be able to make an assessment of that soldier who is not battle ready, if I can call it that, right? Now, if you get a civilian to come and make an assessment of a soldier who is battle ready, do you honestly feel you can get a fair assessment? Because our idea of battle ready has nothing to do with the usual measures that, for example, are out here. For us, Battle Ready, in so many things that would seem abnormal to other people, because we are all about resilience. We are all about pushing the limits. We are all about going over and above. So when you say that this person is at the breaking point, you see, and how can you be able to use the kind of language that you can communicate that is not psychobabble, but is in line with military language to help those in command to understand what needs to be done, okay? So that is why there has to be that special consideration. Number two, it's not every profession in this country where people get up going to work knowing that today they might die. I don't need to tell you that from a hormonal, from a spiritual, psychological, cognitive, and even physical disposition, you will be in a different space as opposed to somebody who says they have a predictable day. Let me put it like that. Deployments also really do take a toll on people. And being able to not only bring somebody back physically, but psychologically, takes a special kind of attention for that to happen. And sometimes to be able to do that, you have to be able to even do it minus the family, but include the family in the course of the way. So that is the ideal situation. But the reality is, we are at war. We have other roles that the military has to be able to perform. And therefore, by the time you're coming back from the theater of war, you quickly have to translate to go back to close operations. You quickly translate to going to begin to prepare for the parade. You quickly translate to going to build the Nanyuki Railway. There is no time to sit and meditate. So how is it we can be able to bring wellness in motion, if I may call it that? That is something that is not available, or it's not necessary for people doing any other kind of work. And here, to even talk about the support for our men and women in uniform, we cannot be able to do that without including the family. What does the family need to know about how to handle somebody who has come from the front and is having night terrors, is having paranoia, is sleeping during the day and staying awake the whole night, somebody who does not want to hear children laugh or any noise, somebody who seems to really just be very sensitive to any kind of trigger. That education also needs to happen to the family, just so that they do not become fearful and attacked. Because the process of being able to align somebody with themselves is work in itself. To realign them with the family is even more work, right? And what my work has been about recently has been about the fact that in the work of soldiering, anyone who has been able to present themselves as having psychologically being disturbed has lost their job. And in the process, lost a source of income, lost security for the future, lost their families, because it is difficult for you to stay with your family with dignity if you can't even buy them food, you can't be able to provide for their education, their clothing, and their living. So, and all that comes from experiences that are work-related. So there has to be that special understanding of how do you then transition these people who don't even have insight in themselves, and instead got so much shame and guilt over how they have turned out. How do you help them be able to face the next chapter of their lives with dignity and resilience? It takes a special kind of understanding. But Trevor, let me just say one thing. Because mental health, mental wellness seems to be relegated to a personal responsibility. We are not looking at it as something that requires national attention or a national strategy, like HIV, for example. History has taught that we wasted a lot of time with moralizing HIV, and it costed us a lot of lives, it costed us a lot of trauma. I don't want us to repeat this process. I don't want us to repeat a lesson we already did. So let us just adapt mental wellness as a part of life, as an issue that requires a national strategy and national ownership. You know, because the system of, but doesn't affect me, why should I care? And this is where we have issues of empathy, compassion, and consideration coming in from the decision makers.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Kasanga, did you get that clause?
Yes, actually, under clause, it runs under clause 28, where we have the provisions for the 27 and 28, where we have the provisions for the Kenya Defense Forces. It's actually there, and it's largely to do with how to handle, our, of course, defense forces in the event that they are mentally ill. Issues of admission and handling, care, and rehabilitation is all covered there. In the event that a member of Kenya Defense Forces suffers from mental illness when they are away from their unit, what happens in such scenarios, and also when they're away from their mother country, what happens when they're in a foreign country, of course subject to certain board approvals. All those are canvassed in there, as well as many other provisions, actually quite detailed on the issues of the armed forces. And I guess because maybe Major Mukiria can also just confirm, the armed forces, of course, have their own internal mechanisms on how they deal with their things. And I think that's why this provision had to be there specifically for the armed forces. And I can also just confidently say that when the bill had gone to the National Assembly under Sabina Chaige's Health Committee, they had actually included as well our police force as well. So it was not just the armed forces, but the police force as well had been considered in the bill, in the additions that they were going to do at the National Assembly. And I'm sure those will still come back when the bill goes to the National Assembly. And just to mention, just to pick up on something that Major has said, the government right now, out of the campaigns that we have had, there has been a good realization, a good level of realization by the government that this must be a national conversation and there must be a national approach, and policy-wise and otherwise, towards mental health. And this is a good thing, and that is why the president pronounced himself on the issues of depression and formed the task force. That is already a good step, showing that the government is now fully aware and alive. And when we pushed for the publication of the task force report, in early last year, just after COVID had hit, we were happy to see the recommendations that the task force came up with, because these are recommendations that actually came from Kenyans. Now, whereas we had received these during public participation of the bill early in 2019 when the bill had been published, it was good to see them come back again from Kenyans. And just to tell you how much Kenyans are fully alive to the issues of mental health, meaning that the government had been lagging behind. It's actually the government now that is having to catch up and put now the systems that are required to roll out national, policies that are up to date with the issues that are affecting Kenyans today. And I do agree with Major Mukiria that the first thing, of course, is the realization that, mental health is a very key determinant to our overall health and economic participation. So as long as you're unwell mentally, you might not even be able to treat other diseases, because you might not even be aware of other diseases because you're busy being, because of, too much anxiety or something else. So your overall health first must start with your mental wellness. That's why we always say, no health without mental health. That has been the campaign that we had been running for a long time. And of course, if you're mentally unwell, for whatever level of mental unwellness, even if it is just depression, you cannot then be a full, you cannot participate in economic activities fully. You cannot be a full citizen. You cannot be fully participating in everyday life. And that affects, how much you contribute to the economy of the country. And that is why you can see a lot of issues now arising and being attached to the financial aspects of money being able to correlate directly to the increased mental and wellness. So that correlation definitely is there. And let me just say, Trevor, so that our viewers can understand that there are some things that can be done, are being done, and what more we can do, even as citizens, even as we await this bill. There's a lot we can do as citizens. And of course, Major Mukiria has mentioned it, and Kevin has also mentioned it. There are things we can do. And I want to say that when the government activated the Nyumba Kumi initiative, sincerely, this is one thing which I feel very strongly that Kenyans need to embrace more. And not just for security reasons, because largely Nyumba Kumi has to do with security reasons, but also as a mechanism for looking out for each other. Trevor, when you hear your neighbors tussling or a fight happening in your neighbor's house, you should not just sit and wait. You should go out and check what it is. It could be a security issue. It could be some gender-based violence happening in the house. It could be somebody in distress and your showing up there will make the difference. You know, that sort of thing must be encouraged amongst our citizens if we are going to tackle these issues very well. Secondly, nothing stops the county governments from rolling out, you know, mental wellness programs. For instance, having a battalion of community health workers who are trained on mental health, being on the ground, talking to Kenyans, giving them, you know, awareness and, you know, trying to help them out. Nothing stops a county government from doing it. In fact, I have to say, Makueni has done very well because we have psychologists at every sub-county level who are available to, you know, at the hospitals, at the county hospitals to, you know, to treat Kenyans. So it is doable. And nothing stops a county government from availing those practitioners and, you know, paying them so that they're there for Kenyans, so that the education and awareness then can be, you know, transmitted. And then, of course, conversations of our practitioners. And this I'm happy about. I've spoken in several forums that are organized by psychologists, Kina Kevin there. I've spoken to many other forums. And these conversations, even Trevor, what we are doing here today, is very important. It also works towards awareness creation. It also works towards fighting stigma. So we must continue with these conversations. In fact, the last time I spoke in a forum, I told them, whether the bill, you know, sees the light of day in this parliamentary cycle or not, does not stop us from adding the volume towards, you know, we want amendments, we want to change the realm of mental health. But more importantly, let us help Kenyans by talking about it. Let the practitioners have forums everywhere. And a lot of these are really now beginning to happen, and that must be encouraged at all times. We take full advantage of these online platforms now in the time of COVID to reach out to Kenyans.
All right.
And of course, most importantly, Trevor, I have to say to our viewers, let us be kind to one another. Okay. Just a little kindness and gentleness goes a long way, and especially for married couples, because a lot of battles now are happening in the marital, you know, space. We have to learn to be a little bit more kind and more gentle, because everyone has different thresholds of handling stress. And especially this time of COVID, or like what Kevin was saying, the fact that you can't see your friends, you can't go out. The issues we used to have to relieve stress are now not there. You can't go dancing, you can't do this, you can't do that. So we need to have a little more gentleness towards, you know, towards one another. And then also, lastly, Trevor, you know, parliamentarians, we rolled out a new campaign which we are calling Fungua Roho campaign, where we are telling ourselves, first as parliamentarians, and then we are telling our citizens, you must open, you know, you must learn to open up. Don't bottle up the issues.
All right.
Fungua Roho, ongea, you know, that already is a beginning of acceptance that I have a problem. And if I speak out, I will get help. Because everyone is always going through something. And more importantly, there is help out there. We have a lot of practitioners. And when you open up your heart, you will find somebody who will point you to the right direction. So these are important conversations which must be had as we wait, of course, the government to continue rolling out ad budgets. Like now, I am aware there's a budget, you know, for enhancing the Mathare is now, they've made it a parastatal. So there's budgets now going towards mental health, and that's a good beginning. It's a good step. It's not enough, but it's a good step. And the county governments themselves don't need to wait for the national government to tell them to put budgets. Those are things the county governments can do, and some counties actually have gone ahead and done that. So these are good, you know, steps forward. And then, of course, it's good to know, it's good for Kenyans to know that the president gazetted the mental health advisor to the president. That is Dr. Njenga, as you know, the psychiatrist, our father of psychiatry. Dr. Njenga is now the presidential advisor on mental health, and I have had meetings with him and the Ministry of Health so that we can see how to enhance the bill further and then fast track. So those are positive steps. You can see the government is keen and is aware now that something must happen and there must be change for posterity. I
have to take a quick break here on Daybreak, but there's a lot of feedback coming through. Let's run them really quick before we take a break, and then I'll come to all of you to give us the closing remarks as we wind up on this discussion. Of course, it's something we can't finish just today. We'll keep on having more conversations around mental health and the best way forward, which is what I'll want to hear from my guests as the final closing remarks on how do we deal with these issues coming through. At Wairimu, Phyllis M. says we must first agree and accept the situation. Kwa ground is so bad when it comes to mental health. This is truly a national disaster, and the poor leadership and chaotic economy is a major contributor. This is such a vicious cycle. All right, let's see what else you're saying here on Twitter really quick before we move on to other things. Felix Njika says, taking care of yourself can be better equip you to take care of others. During times of social distancing, it is especially important to stay connected with your friends and family, helping others cope with stress through phone calls. All right, Felix, thank you so much for that. Let's see what else you're saying here on Twitter really quick before we take that break. Governor 254 says, talking about mental health can give us freedom to seek help, find people who can relate and move towards well-being. Let's continue the conversation about mental health. Together, we can work to stop the stigma surrounding issues many of us face. All right. On that note, let's take a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, we take closing remarks from my guest. All right. See you in a bit.